Welcome to our first video for the Boundaries and Consent Bootcamp. This is a bit of an introductory video. So let me just get you up to speed with a little bit of background before we dive into Module 1. So the first thing I want to say is welcome and thank you so much for signing up for this bootcamp. Over the next 3 months we're going to be doing great things, talking about how to really feel your boundaries, how to speak up and defend them, and a whole bunch of other things around consent. What are some big mistakes people make? How do we respond when our boundaries aren't being respected? What do we do with coercion? So we're going to be diving into all kinds of different things there. So I'm really excited to receive your feedback, to be doing this with you, to hear what kind of an impact it has on your life and how you're sharing it with your kids. Now, I think boundaries are so important because it's really how we create safety in relationships. You know, we talk about respecting one another, and I think what that ultimately comes down to is really valuing each other's boundaries. And so when we want to create safety with one another, especially with our kids, because we want to be having these crucial conversations with them, these conversations about sex, about porn, about relationships, then we really have to create that safety, otherwise they are going to slam that door shut. Right? If I don't feel safe, I'm going to do everything I can to get away. And so we want to create that in our partnerships, we want to create that with our friends, we want to create that with our kids. And it really boils down to respecting each other's boundaries and being able to communicate about boundaries clearly. So that's why I'm so passionate about this topic. I think that this is the big skill, the major social skill that we are not teaching very well. So I'm excited to give it a try, teaching you this skill and teaching it to you in a more methodical, baby step, step-by-step skill building kind of a manner, you know, which is my background as a teacher, right? I get excited about that. So I want to tell you a story that I think really illustrates this. I had one woman attend my workshop, and I always bring a table of books to my workshops because I feel like parents really don't know what kinds of children's literature is out there to help us have these conversations. So I bring my mini library and I set it out. And she tells me, oh yeah, my parents tried to use a book with me and it was awful and it was a total mistake and I don't want to do that with my kids. And I'm like, tell me more, right? What really happened? And she said that she remembered her parents sitting down with a book and reading it to her, and she just sort of sunk into the couch, like lower and lower, getting more and more uncomfortable, and her parents just kept on going. And that memory was so strong for her that she was like, I don't want to put my child through that. I don't want to use a book. And I said, well, it sounds to me like the book wasn't necessarily the problem, but boundaries might have been the problem, where your parents weren't checking in to see if you were feeling okay with this, where you weren't voicing that you were feeling uncomfortable and that you wanted this to stop, right? That's a boundaries skill. That's different than the book being the problem. I said, if the boundaries skills had been in place, where you as the child were speaking up, where your parents were checking in, where you felt like your voice would be heard, then the book could have been a great success. And so ultimately, she thought about it. She decided that her relationship with her kids was really different and that they were better able to speak up about what they needed and what they felt and that she would be able to check in. And so she tried using a book with great success, right? Emailed me later and told me how wonderful it was in terms of the experience, how it brought them closer together as a family. Okay, so I think that this is a common theme where we think, oh yeah, that doesn't work. And the problem wasn't the thing. The problem was boundaries. So that's another reason why I'm really excited to be diving into a course on boundaries and consent with y'all. Okay, another piece of this is that we sometimes replicate the dynamics of our families of origin, and we don't even recognize that we're doing it. So I had a friend who said to me, God, I turn every girlfriend into my mother. Yeah, and right there that screamed boundaries to me. I thought, okay, you know, his mom would yell at him and nag at him, and so he developed this really high tolerance where the first time he was asked to do something, he didn't do it because he knew his mother would come back and ask him again and say again, right? And so he didn't really have to do anything until the fourth or fifth try, which meant that he just didn't respond the first time that he was asked nicely. Well, you can see how a girlfriend would end up falling down this pattern. She might be totally sweet and considerate in the beginning. She'd ask him once, and he wouldn't do it. Whatever the thing was, he might not even respond. And then, of course, she'd ask again and get louder and louder and louder until he's like, dang, I thought you were nice, and now you're just like my mom. Okay, did he do that or did she do that? Right? And we all do this with our relationships. We're in these patterns and we're not aware of them. And so if we have this, call it a character flaw, call it an oversight, whatever you want to call it. If we have this poor boundary cycle where it's like, I'm not listening to someone else's boundaries, or I'm not speaking up about my own boundaries, then unfortunately we replicate the things that we really don't like in relationships from our families of origin, because this is how we've learned to be. And, not every partner is going to be comfortable nagging and screaming, right? And so that girlfriend of my friend, she may very well decide that this relationship doesn't work for her because she doesn't like who she is in that relationship, right? She doesn't like having to nag and scream in order to get any of her requests honored. And he might decide that this relationship doesn't work with him, right? This was not what I was looking for. I thought I was after something else when I partnered up with this person. And so we may actually be looking for something different than what we end up with. And the person who we do end up with may end up just like the thing we were trying to avoid. And so let's say that my friend never changes his ways. The only time that he ever gets anything done or honors someone else's boundaries is when he gets nagged to death. Well, the only partner who's going to stick with him is someone who's comfortable nagging him to death, right? The only one who's going to say yes to his proposal is someone who's okay with that dynamic. Somebody who maybe has healthier boundaries and wants a different dynamic may not be able to educate him, change him, right? We don't want to be changed. We want someone to accept us the way we are, right? If he's not growing, then he might get stuck there. And he may end up choosing a partner who's okay with being stuck there. In which case, there you are, right? You're not ending up with a partner who has healthy boundaries, and you have healthy boundaries, and you've got this great, respectful dynamic. Instead, you're back in the quagmire. The people who have really healthy boundaries, who really respect other people, they're not going to go for that. They're going to look at that and say, man, I asked really kindly and really clearly the first time, and it wasn't granted. I feel disrespected, right? Or we didn't have a conversation around it, or I wasn't even listened to. And they're going to walk away. And so if we want to help our kids have really healthy relationships, if we want really healthy relationships for ourselves, right? Because some of us are on our second, third, fourth relationship, marriage, right? So if we want those patterns for ourselves, then we have to recognize what those patterns are and do that self-work, right? I thought, oh my goodness, I have to help my friend hear what people need the first time they ask, or else he's always going to be on this treadmill. So that's another important aspect of this work. Now, I do want to, before we dive into the content of building this up from scratch, I want to liberate you from some of the notions you might have grown up with. Because some of them are not helpful. Some of them, are things that got passed down to us over time, but they don't actually do the job, right? They don't actually help get us where we need to go. So an example of that would be delayed gratification, right? Something that we're taught endlessly in school, right? And from our parents, right? Do this first and then you'll get what you want. Achieve this and then, right? Work hard and then you'll get that promotion. And so delayed gratification is an awesome skill. We all should be able to do it. It's very important. The problem is that if we don't balance it with anything else, the scales sort of tip. Right? We're doing all delayed gratification, which means we may never get our needs met. Right? We never go back to, oh, here's what I want and need and desire, to feel full and whole and healthy as a human, right? To feel really alive. So sometimes we take delayed gratification too far. I know I have definitely done that. And we can turn into workaholics. We can prioritize the wrong things, right? Where we never ever get our needs met. So delayed gratification is a skill, It's a part-time skill, not an all-the-time skill. We need the other as well. The golden rule, I have trouble with the golden rule. I think it gets deployed and used badly a lot of the time. So let's talk about sex, for example. Someone's like, I'd be comfortable kissing. Of course you'd be comfortable kissing. What's good for me is good for you, right? Golden rule. I'm going to treat you the way that I want to be treated. Well, we know that's not true. So if I'm comfortable sharing my fancy pen, that doesn't mean that somebody else would be. And that's too big of an assumption. Excuse me, I have a little cold. And so the golden rule is this assumption that the way that I feel is the way that you would feel. And I just don't think that that holds a lot of the time. Now, I've felt deep sadness and you felt deep sadness, and that way I can empathize with you. I know what deep sadness feels like. I can assume that your sadness feels just as bad as my sadness. So when it comes to emotions, the golden rule may work. But when it comes to actions, like, can you wear my shirt? Well, just because you'd be willing to let me borrow your shirt doesn't mean I'm willing to let you borrow it, right? It breaks down when we get around to actions, when we get around to actual boundaries. So this idea that you should just respect yourself and others, it sounds great, but I don't think it works. Because when we say that to people, respect yourself, what does that mean? Does that mean that you should prioritize yourself and always ask to get your way? Does that mean that you should compromise? Make sure that you get a little of what you asked for? Like, what the heck does that mean? When we say respect others, does that mean you should always give them their way? Respect your elders. Seems to mean give them their way. If we say respect the equipment, that means take care of it, right? Respect the schoolyard. That means don't leave it a mess. So this respect word doesn't really convey anything very clearly. I think over time, we learn how to treat ourselves well and how to treat other people well, how to treat the equipment well, and how to treat the school well. And so it's a reference to our accumulated knowledge and wisdom. But of course, kids haven't accumulated very much knowledge and wisdom. And so when we ask them to do the right thing, just respect themselves and others and this place, they don't really know what that means. And sometimes we don't really know what that means either. So I don't like that one very much. So that's not one we'll be talking about. Relying on social norms can be useful, for sure, right? Because social norms are like an average. It's like most people in this society are comfortable with this. And so that is now our norm. Our norm is that most people in the society are going to wear clothes. And so if you walk outside naked, it might technically be legal. Here in San Francisco it is. But it will make a few people uncomfortable, right? It's against the social norm. So relying on social norms works pretty well. But people are different, right? There are ways that the social norms won't fit us or won't suit us. And we should be allowed to be unique, right? We should be allowed to be quirky and interesting. And so just conforming to all the social norms may or may not work. Moreover, sometimes there are unhealthy social norms. So right now for our teens, watching pornography is a social norm. It is normal for them. It's kind of like not brushing your teeth every night. Also normal for them, right? They're social norms that are no good. And so just saying, gosh, if everybody else is doing it, if it would make other people uncomfortable, that's not quite clear enough for teaching healthy boundaries or teaching people the way to go. And the last one, of course, is just people pleasing, right? Relying on not creating conflict is not a good way to go about defending your boundaries or teaching boundaries. So if all we're doing is avoiding conflict with other people, then we sure are abiding by those social norms. We may very well be respecting people in a way that they feel respected. But ultimately, you're losing yourself, right? Ultimately, you're not practicing your own voice, being assertive, right? You're not standing your ground. Because when the conflict gets high enough, you fold. And so people pleasing is not a way that works either, right? Avoiding conflict. Avoiding conflict is not going to be good enough. And we all naturally avoid conflict, at least a little. There's some of us who have a higher tolerance than others, for sure. But avoiding conflict is not going to be a good way for teaching boundaries. and consent. Okay, so ultimately, our goal here with this boot camp is to be teaching healthy boundaries, which, when you can do that, that means that you have a really strong, pardon, a really strong, healthy internal compass, guiding you in all of your decisions, so that there will be times when you're like, yeah, I can go with that. Or yes, this is just right. This is exactly what I want. Or no, that is not going to work with me. I'm sorry, I have to walk away. You know? So that's that strong internal compass, which we hope to bestow upon our kids. And having poor boundaries, having trouble with this, just means that we haven't skill built it enough. We haven't honed that internal compass, and I believe that can change, especially with kids. Adults who are a little bit more stuck in our ways, but kids are very malleable. And so if we do that skill building, then we can really help them gain integrity if they lack integrity. We can help them avoid these intense social and emotional consequences that come when you don't have integrity or when you have unhealthy boundaries. So that's the goal of this course. I know that we haven't dived into the content of what I really want you to build step by step, but I thought this intro video was important to do to kind of liberate you and introduce you to why this work is important and what we hope to achieve and what are some of the things that don't work, right? And so they're not going to be part of this course. We're going to be doing other things. And if you know somebody who you think should be in this course now that you've seen this intro video, please just drop me an email or send them a note, send them one of the previous emails about this, and let them know that this is happening, because we really don't have a cap on how many people can join this course since it's video modules. So they're certainly welcome to join even after this point. All right, fantastic. Thank you for watching this entire video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you for Module 1.